I'd already spent the whole morning and most of the afternoon with family, so now it was just time to go home and wind down for the rest of the night. Maybe watch a holiday movie or something. I drove 45 minutes from my parents' home to mine. The roads were empty, as you could imagine, and if not for it being Christmas, it would have actually been kind of eerie. Everything was so quiet and motionless outside. Anyway, I got home around 8, pulling in the garage and heading inside. I flicked on the entrance light and immediately saw some papers spread across the floor in the hallway. It was all from a stack of mail I had sitting on the counter that I guess had fallen over. I didn't overthink it, I just picked it all back up and tossed it back on the counter. I did leave the house in a rush that morning, so maybe I ran past it and caused the pile to fall, and I just didn't notice. After cleaning it up, I walked around and turned on the rest of the lights, then went into the living room. I had a Christmas tree set up in the corner. It was one of those small fake ones that looked pretty sad, but it was better than nothing. I sat back on the couch and found a movie to watch, some new Netflix Christmas movie. It was actually pretty good. I watched the whole thing, but throughout the whole movie, I kept hearing something in my house. It was like quiet, almost inaudible creaks. I wasn't even sure if I was actually hearing it or not, because every time I'd think I'd heard something, I'd pause the movie and listen, but didn't hear it anymore. I took it as a sign that this Christmas day was over for me, as I needed to get to bed and sleep off the exhaustion of seeing all my family. I turned off the TV and all the lights downstairs and went up to my bedroom, walking in and turning on the overhead lamp. Without hesitation, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't pinpoint what it was at first, but I knew my room was not how I'd left it. Something had been moved, and I quickly put all the pieces together of everything else I'd been experiencing since getting back home. My body felt numb, both fear and adrenaline taking over me. I walked back out into the hallway and looked down the staircase, trying to listen to see if whoever had been here was still here or not. I quietly went down, step by step, until I reached the bottom. There was no sound or motion at all. "Is anyone here? I've called the cops. Hello?" It was as I was saying that I realized my stupid mistake of not having called the cops yet. I started to go back upstairs, planning to lock myself in my room and call the police, when sudden footsteps rushed from the living room. It was too dark to see anything more than the Christmas tree branches swaying and a figure rushing away from it. I followed the sound into the kitchen and then the back door. They opened it and ran away. I was just standing there, frozen. Once I snapped out of it, I dialed 911 and locked the back door. I still don't really know what happened that Christmas night. Whoever had broken in hadn't taken much of anything, at least nothing that I really noticed. What I think is that they got in just as I was getting home, and once they heard the garage open, they probably sprinted through the kitchen, knocking over the papers, and hid. I know I saw them running away from the tree, but if they were hiding the whole time I was watching the movie, it wouldn't explain the noises I was hearing. Maybe there really weren't any noises, or it was something else entirely. The thought of them being right there in the corner of the room, in front of me, waiting and watching me for 2 whole hours, is just horribly disturbing. I wish I had more answers, and could tell you more, but that's everything I know. Police weren't of much help, and nothing has happened since. Hopefully, it stays that way. This was the first year I'd be spending Christmas alone. I think it sounds sadder than it was, but I couldn't afford the flight back to my hometown, and couldn't take off any extra vacation time to make it worth it. Anyway, I always enjoyed seeing others' decorations, and driving or walking around on Christmas Day. When I woke up, I turned on the old cartoon Grinch movie and made a nice breakfast and some coffee. Then I spent the next hour on FaceTime with my parents and siblings. After all that, it was probably around noon. I didn't have much else to do, but at some point I went out to get the mail, and when I opened the door, there were footprints in the snow on my porch. What's odd is that they were frozen over, like not freshly made in the powdery top layer of snow. They were clearly made hours ago, like overnight when it was well below freezing. I looked around, even though they clearly were not here anymore, then went out and got my mail. It was very strange. I don't know if I felt scared, but definitely a bit unsettled. I didn't really know what to do about it though. I tried to continue my day without worrying too much. After all, it was Christmas. I had some Hallmark movies play while I opened the gifts and letters that my family had sent in the mail. Around 3, I started getting bored and checked the weather. It was supposed to get a lot colder later in the day, so I decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood while I still had the chance. I bundled up and started down the sidewalk, looking at all the Christmas lights and taking in the calmness. A little bit into the walk, I noticed someone else walking in the neighborhood. They were the only other person I saw, and they were walking on the other side of the road. I thought nothing of it, but a few minutes later, they passed by me again. I did a double take, thinking I was seeing things, because there was no way we could have passed each other twice so soon, unless they turned around right after we passed each other the first time. I kept walking and came up to a split where I could either head back home or keep going around the neighborhood. I ended up going home. It wasn't because of the guy I saw. Sure, it was strange, but something else just felt off and made me want to head back. I went in through the front door, and eerily soon after I got inside, there was a knock at the door. I had only just taken off my boots and was still standing right by the door. My heart pounded in my chest, like I knew this was bad. I looked out the peephole and saw a guy standing very close to the door, wearing a baseball cap tilted downward, covering his face. Weirdly, he seemed familiar. I didn't know why. At the moment, I thought it was just because he was the man I'd seen walking around the neighborhood. He knocked again. I knew he had to have already seen me enter. "What do you need?" I called out. They didn't answer. A few seconds later, they banged on the door again. I asked again what they were doing here and what they wanted, and watched out the peephole as he just stood there against the door and refused to answer or speak at all, before banging on the door again. He then grabbed the door handle and started shoving his whole body into it. I backed away as the whole door shook, rattling from its hinges with each blow. It went on for maybe 20 to 30 seconds, then it all suddenly stopped. There was a pause, and then multiple people yelling. When I went over and looked, there were 2 cops outside my home, arresting the man at my door. I was completely confused and unsure how this happened. I thought it was just some kind of miracle that they showed up at the perfect time. It turned out a neighbor had actually called the police and reported a man acting unusual, walking back and forth down our street for hours and standing outside my home. Even more disturbing though, I knew the man. He was an old ex from probably 6 years ago. He didn't even live in the same state as me anymore, and we hadn't talked at all since the breakup. It's scary to think that so suddenly, years later, he just decided to show up at my house on Christmas Day and try to break in. The cops found 2 knives on him, and in his car that he parked a few blocks away, he had a firearm and a whole roll of duct tape, both that he purchased just a few days prior. He admitted to nothing, but it's not hard to see what he was likely intending to do.